Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jordan coming from the See You in Court podcast. Today we have episode 1, the inaugural episode. I think it's definitely appropriate to introduce myself. My name is Jordan. I am a student at the University of Vermont. Right now I'm studying education with a focus on history and a minor in political science. Recently I've become very, very enamored with the Supreme Court and the institution itself and all of its decisions that it's made over the years. I think it's incredibly interesting how people have grappled with these decisions, how these arguments come before the court, because they all start with pretty regular people who have their cases just appealed and appealed and appealed to where it's become national news. And the logic and the problem solving that the judges put into every decision that they make, it's driven some of them insane trying to find what they think is the right answer to some of these cases. And I feel that. I argue with myself all the time when I have to write a paper for my con law class. And it's something that's really close to my heart. It's something that's very intellectually exciting for me, and I want to share it with you guys. We're going to start off with something a little bit uncontroversial here. We'll definitely get into some more controversial political stuff, especially with the Kavanaugh appointment on the horizon. But today we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is The Simpsons. Yep, I know you probably didn't expect that from a Supreme Court podcast, but we're going to be talking about America's favorite yellow family.
He's the boy you love to hate.
Well, you've got to start being firm with him. I believe with persistent discipline, even the poorest student can end up becoming, say, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
In Season 6, Episode 4, called The Itchy and Scratchy Movie, Bart Simpson is revealed that in the future he will become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And a bunch of other episodes have corroborated that idea, along with the idea that Lisa will eventually become President of the United States. So I think it's definitely going to be interesting to follow what Bart's legal career would look like if he actually does end up becoming the Chief Justice. I really have to credit, obviously, the Simpsons team for creating such an amazing, brilliant, hilarious series, and for including that cool little detail about Bart's future in that. But I also want to thank the YouTube user called The Real Jims for making so many Simpsons videos, but particularly one about the Simpsons timeline and what it would look like in the future, because that's what really kind of sparked me to make this episode. Like, hey, Bart is going to be a Supreme Court justice, and the Supreme Court and the Simpsons, two of my favorite things on the planet. So let's get into this. The series has been running twice as long as I've been alive, but Bart is still the same 10-year-old troublemaker that he was in 1989, I want to say is the first episode. But needless to say, he has a long way to go before he becomes Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The Real Jim's video about the Simpsons timeline puts Bart's nomination at about 2033, which would make him a pretty young Chief Justice, like Chief Justice Roberts. He was, I think, only 50 when he was in his 50s when he was nominated to the Chief Justiceship. So, what is it going to take for Bart to turn his life around and become a judge? So I really want to explore this hypothetical appointment and maybe try to, set a little career guide for those aspiring Chief Justices out there. Now, contrary to popular belief, you don't actually have to be an Associate Justice before you become a Chief Justice. You don't even really have to do much of anything. You don't have to. Unlike the presidents and the congressmen and women, the Constitution is totally silent about the qualifications for a Supreme Court justice and for a Chief Justice. There's no minimum age, no required education, and no citizenship test even. So, in theory, all Bart needs to do to become Chief Justice is a president to nominate him and a Senate to confirm him. If a Senate is filled with insane yes men and some madman president who decides to nominate him, the 10-year-old would be robed up and issuing opinions with no legal training, no education, and it would all be nice and legal. But let's suppose we are taking this a little bit seriously, and Bart doesn't want to get laughed out of the Capitol hearings. And he actually wants to, issue some good opinions. He'd probably want to be a bit older. The youngest ever appointed Supreme Court justice was Joseph Story, who was 32 and appointed in 1812. And he's one of the most prolific ones. A lot of people, I think the Heritage Foundation named their lecture after him, and he's just super well known as one of the greats to sit on the bench. And he was the youngest appointed at the time. So Bart's going to have plenty of time to explore other career paths, as the show hints at, and he'll be getting some education. The first thing you probably want to, practice law, you probably want a law school diploma. This is a very, very low bar, no pun intended, but knowing about the law, very good thing for a Chief Justice to do. You'd think that he would need a high school diploma or an undergrad degree first, but there are actually justices who have had neither and sat on the bench. Justice Whitaker was a 9th grade dropout and was born into rural poverty but attended the Kansas City School of Law, making an agreement with the headmaster that he would finish high school by the time he graduated law school. So he took law classes and high school night classes, all while working at the farm to pay his tuition and to support himself. He was on that grind. Now, the most recent instance of a quote-unquote uneducated justice was Justice Burns, who was appointed in 1941 and was the last justice appointed who had not gone to law school. Like Whitaker, he didn't graduate high school. He finessed the bar exam, though, at age 23. Like Abraham Lincoln, he self-educated, just went to work with some books in a room, and was able to pass the bar exam that way. This has certainly changed since then. At the time of doing this podcast, the entire bench of the Supreme Court is Ivy League alumni, 5 of which are from Harvard. But school was never really Bart's style, so I think he definitely has a shot at going the non-traditional route and maybe self-educating, reading a few books about con law after a shift at the construction site. But realistically, I think without a diploma, he would have to leave the Senate chambers with tomato all over his face. So let's presume that he goes to law school, and then Bart passes the law exam. So that's the first, major hurdles in a law career. He now has to get the attention of a president, or, at least enough attention to get nominated, which is kind of difficult. President Lisa Simpson probably would not be able to manage it. I don't think that there would ever be a law. Let me put it this way. It's not illegal for a president to nominate her brother for the Supreme Court. It would probably be suspicious enough that the Senate wouldn't want to confirm them. There obviously have been instances of nepotism in the presidential cabinet. Most famously, JFK had his brother as Attorney General. Currently, President Trump has Ivanka doing something in his administration. And Kushner apparently has a very big deal in it too. But they weren't confirmed, cabinet level individuals. There are anti-nepotism laws that apply to congressmen, but I think that there would be enough deference to the power of the executive branch that they would let Lisa get away with nominating Bart. But that's the easy way out. Let's really dig into this and not take the easy way out and say, okay, Lisa just nominated Bart. That's how he gets past that. There's no really set path to get senpai president to notice somebody. If there's a Republican president, being a member of the Federalist Society is going to be a huge plus for you. But there's no one way to become a justice. The best advice that sitting justices and judges of all levels will give you is to get a clerkship. You really want to get a clerkship. Now, a law clerk is basically just an intern, a paid intern to a judge. They assist with opinion writing, with legal research, and just general assistance. Probably coffee. If you're a clerk for Clarence Thomas, then you're also probably playing basketball with him and taking a trip to Gettysburg, and if you're unlucky, you're getting sexually harassed. Sorry about that, man. But the best way to get a clerkship is to make strong connections with professors at your law schools. Their recommendations will definitely set you apart from the phone book of other clerk applicants. Now, no matter what Jeff Sessions says, you don't need to be a judge before you become a justice. Plenty of people have become justices with never having sat on a bench in their lives. For instance, Elena Kagan had never sat on the judge's bench, but she'd been through a long career as a prosecutor and became Barack Obama's Solicitor General. The Solicitor General is basically the executive branch's lawyer for when they get sued and need to defend themselves in court. Many of the most prolific justices have actually been nominated from that role, including Thurgood Marshall, William Howard Taft, and Justice Jackson have all held the Solicitor General position. Other backgrounds include members of the president's cabinet, congressmen, and players for the Detroit Lions. That's only Byron White, but it's kind of cool to note there's a football player on the Supreme Court. There's a nice little infographic that I found, and I'll post that in the show notes. So it looks like Bart should either start lifting those weights and try to get on the Detroit Lions, or start practicing in a private firm, or maybe land himself a lower judgeship on a state Supreme Court, maybe, which, depending on which state Springfield actually is in, could mean that he would have to run a partisan election to become a judge. I think it would make sense if Lisa Simpson appointed him as Solicitor General while she was president, or maybe as her Attorney General. Nepotism, again, generally frowned upon, but, it's probably cool. They did pass laws against it after JFK appointed RFK as his Attorney General, but I don't think it would be enforced against the president, because the executive power is seen as being broad enough to put whoever they want in their cabinet or in the judgeships. I think that there would be a bigger issue with the judgeships, and ironically enough, if there was an issue with the nomination breaking the anti-nepotism law, that would probably go to the Supreme Court, funnily enough. But anyways, at any rate, Bart's now in the legal field. He's distinguished himself. He's proven that he's not just a run-of-the-mill Lionel Hutz, attorney at law. He's doing a little bit better than Mr. Hutz is. Now, if Bart becomes an appeals court judge, what he's going to want to do is he's going to want to make most of his rulings be right. Now, what does it mean to make a correct ruling as an appeals judge? Basically, that means don't get your opinions reversed. One of Nixon's appointees failed his confirmation because he had too many of his opinions reversed upon a further review. When it got sent up to the higher court, they're like, nope, you got this terribly, terribly wrong. This isn't law. We're throwing this out. And 58% of this judge's rulings were reversed by higher courts. And it was that judge was defended by one senator as saying, okay, well, this judge, he's a representative for the mediocre lawyers and judges. Because that's what the seats are really all about, is representation. Now, speaking of Nixon's failed appointees, and there are quite a few of them, let's help Bart get confirmed by the Senate. And, we might touch on a bit about the upcoming battle for Kavanaugh's seat. So let me just lay out a few rules that I think would be good for to keep in mind if you ever find yourself in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Number 1, don't be a flagrant racist. In addition to having most of his opinions thrown out, failed Justice Carswell had blatantly advocated for white supremacy in a failed 1948 political campaign that came back to haunt him when he faced the Senate. Now, Bart has never done anything as public... Bart's a bit of a bad egg, but he's never done anything as bad as publicly endorsing segregation. But he'll probably make sure that his mischievous past stays in the past, and a few things probably need expunging. He's only gone to jail at least 10 times. Rule number 2. Don't have shady stuff going on with your finances. There have been plenty of technically legal things that have still caused resignations. Most notably, Justice Abe Fortas, who LBJ wanted to put up for Chief Justice, but he resigned because of, again, technically legal, but still kind of shady business dealings. Thankfully, I think most of Bart's stripping money was cash, so that should be an issue. Number 3. Still, don't make incredibly shitty decisions. Just because the decision doesn't get overturned doesn't mean it's not shitty. Justices are grilled about speeches, lectures, articles that they've written and delivered, opinions and arguments they've made in court. They're probably going to tear apart Kavanaugh's history for this one and have tried to tear through all of his speeches and his decisions to figure out where he stands on things like the special counsel and things like Roe v. Wade. Members of the Senate Judiciary Committee can call forth character witnesses, which is like a really intense series of calling job references, and the opposition party can also call witnesses against you, which are just hostile interests and members of NGOs who are pretty much diametrically opposed to what you want to do as a judge. And there will be questions about and concerns about how you might use your new position as a Supreme Court judge to take people's guns or to sentence them to freeze to death in the back of a truck. They'll scrutinize your entire professional life, just try to discern Bart's views on important legal questions of the day, and try to figure out what he thinks equal protection actually means. Now, while justices technically don't have political parties, they're registered. Most of them are registered, and they definitely vote. Each party has a vested interest in how the judges that they confirm will see the law. And if they don't see the law in the same way that they do, they won't get confirmed. Now, to put this in an example, the Republicans see a very maximalist Second Amendment, and they would want to confirm a judge who also has a very maximalist view of the Second Amendment. Because even though these aren't, this isn't a political issue, it's a... Number 4, make sure that your party affiliations are in order and that those affiliations match the president's and the Senate's, most importantly. Now, while judges aren't really supposed to have a political affiliation, they certainly do. They've certainly voted in elections, they've certainly registered to vote in primaries, and they definitely have, personal politics. Each party definitely has a vested interest in how a nominee has ruled in the past or would rule on hot issues, guns, abortions, executive powers, etc. But party lines matter more than just about anything else in this entire process, and rather than waste your time explaining why that's true, I'm going to play you some audio of Mitch McConnell arguing against his own bill that he proposed because Barack Obama came out in favor of that bill.
Madam President, reserving the right to object. Matters of this controversy, what we're talking about here is a perpetual debt ceiling grant, in effect, to the president. Matters of this level of controversy always require 60 votes, and so I would ask my friend, the majority leader, if he would modify his consent agreement to set the threshold for this vote at 60.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Reserving the right to object, but what we have here is a case of the Republicans here in the Senate once again not taking yes for an answer. This morning, a Republican leader asked consent to have a vote on his proposal. Just now, I told everyone that we're willing to have that vote, up or down vote. But now the Republican leader objects his own idea.
Rule number 5, don't sexually harass anybody. Yes, I know Justice Thomas still gets confirmed, but that's because he played the race card like it was the last one in his Uno hand, and we're a shitty society that doesn't believe women. That's all I gotta say about that. Number 6, don't smoke the reefer. President Reagan appointed Douglas Ginsburg, no relation to the RBG, to the court in 1987, but reports that he smoked fat doinks with his students as a law professor led him to get shot down in the Senate. So put that bong down if you want to be on the Supreme Court. Number 7, make sure that both of his home state senators approve of him. Now, while this rule has kind of fallen out of favor, a nominee's home state senator has the ability to pull a blue slip, which is an informal veto of the nominee. Let's just hope that Bart hasn't done anything to piss off the senator of insert state here. Now, once Bart's entire personal and professional life have been put through the ringer on live TV, the Senate Judiciary Committee votes on him. He'd require 10 of the 19 current committee members to approve him and open him up to a full Senate hearing, where he would then need to get 51 of the 100 U.S. senators to support his nomination. Now, back in 2017, he would need to get 60 votes, but the great political turtle Mitch McConnell invoked the nuclear option during the Gorsuch confirmation and made it easier for parties to confirm some more controversial and arguably more partisan judges and justices. Now, while this new rule has probably done irreparable harm to our institutions and to our judiciary and to the Americans' faith in the judiciary, it does make Bart's confirmation easier. So let's say he does it. You know, he gets all of the votes, and after a long, grueling Senate confirmation, Bart is officially Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And as Chief Justice, he'll be charged with writing the more controversial opinions of the court. He'll have to assign other justices to write opinions for other cases. And he'll also get himself a pretty nice salary, which at time of writing is $267,000 a year for the Supreme Court, for the Chief Justice, $267,000 for the Chief Justice, $255,000 for an Associate Justice. He also gets a very nice choice of federal employee health benefits and a very, very nice pension, an annual pension equal to their highest full salary. And to keep that in perspective, the salary of the Chief Justice goes up about $2,000 to $3,000 annually. So, and they serve very, very long term. So that's going to be a very sweet pension and a very sweet lifestyle for Bart. He certainly applied himself, and he's certainly risen above his station. With a little effort and a little bit of intelligence, even the most troublesome little boy can rise above their station and become, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
What great men he would join. John Marshall, Charles Evans Hughes, Warren Burger. Burger.
Hey, so if you're listening to this, then that means you made it through the entire episode of Hearing Me Speak, which is something that I definitely can't do, so props to you. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, leave a review. It helps other people find this. Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your professor, tell your dogs about us. In the show notes is a link to some of the places that I got information for this episode, a few articles that I recommend checking out, and a link to the Twitter page. So keep the Twitter, drop a follow, drop a review. Thanks for the listen, thanks for the support, and good luck, and have a blessed or non-blessed evening depending on your religious affiliations. We don't discriminate here.